Roma, though. Claudio Ranieri, the Tinkerman, is now the coach of Roma, and I suppose you expected him to tinker around, but it doesn't seem to be working. Nikki, how bad has this start been for Claudio Ranieri in context, please?
Well, it's easy to look at it and say it's been a bad start because they've played 3 games and they haven't won any of them. I think even the sort of faintest scratch of the surface shows that that's pretty unreasonable assessment to make, because the 3 games they've played so far were away to Napoli, who are top of the league, having a very Antonio Conte season so far. Extremely difficult team to break down. I also think even within that story, by the way, if you want to dig into that game, Romelu Lukaku, of course, playing against Roma and scoring against them, his former club, absolutely should have been sent off before he scored. Should have been sent off very early in that game. Had 2, I would say, orange challenges. And I don't think he even got a booking. So would have been very reasonable for Roma to come away feeling hard done by. Even then, they lose 1-0 and Dovbyk hit the bar for them as well. So not a terrible performance, really, away to Napoli, who are top of the league. Then they go away to Tottenham and draw in Europe. And then their next game is against Atalanta. I could make you a case right now that Atalanta are playing the best football in Italy, ahead of Inter, ahead of Napoli. I think they're playing sensational football at the moment. They
were in that game for a long time, weren't they? Right?
Oh yeah. That was that again. Absolutely not a blowout. So I think it would be very unreasonable to make a damning judgment of Ranieri right away. And I also think that perhaps more poignant than me sat here saying that in a studio, no one in Rome is making a damning judgment of him right away. That Atalanta game was the first home game of the 3. Well, also, by the way, on a very short preparation, that game, of course, because they got back from playing Tottenham. I think I saw they got back into Rome on the Friday at like 5 a.m. or something. So not much time to prepare that game, Belle.
Why didn't they stay in one of Don Claudio's properties? Should have stayed in London for the night.
Or just piled in. Imagine a big sleepover.
Build team spirit in a difficult time.
But they look, everything you expect about Ranieri taking over at Rome again. We saw in that home game against Atalanta, the fans were on side. There were banners for him. There was support for him. I think he's going to have that leeway. We're certainly hearing that the Friedkins are willing to spend again in January to upgrade the squad in ways that he wants to, which on the one hand is extraordinary because they've spent a lot already, but certainly from his point of view, encouraging. So I don't think there's any sense of panic around Ranieri. I don't think he's got an easy job on his hand either. I think there's significant work to be done there, but it's too early to be negative about it.
Is he tinkering at least?
A
Yes,
little.
definitely.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing so far has been Mats Hummels actually getting some game time. Now, look, I do think this has to be taken in context again, because like people have said, how has Mats Hummels not played so far? I think it has gone on a little bit longer than it should have done. Him like not playing, of course, he came on when they lost 5-1 at Fiorentina, scored an own goal in the first couple of minutes, then came on under Ranieri for the second half of this game at Napoli when he changed his system at half time, went from a 4 to a 3 at the back. But we have to say, Hummels took ages to decide what he was going to do this summer. He didn't have a pre-season. He is 35. Of course, he was one of the best defenders, if not the best defender in the Champions League last season. But I think we've seen in recent seasons, there is no player on earth who can do without a pre-season and not feel the effects of that. You know, we've seen some really good players suffer from that sort of position. He didn't sign for Roma until September. So it was always going to take a while for him to make a debut and make his impact. Now, the thing that Hummels himself has pointed out is, well, if I don't play, I can't get into rhythm. And that has been the problem, really. Now, I was there at Tottenham when he made his first start for Roma. Of course, he made his first start at the Olimpico at home against Atalanta in this game on Monday. And Hummels had, it was a crazy game anyway. But the game, Hummels was the game in microcosm, really. Because he started it really badly. He was a little bit like Austin Powers when he's been defrosted from cryogenic freezing, not really knowing where he was, gave away that penalty in the first 2 minutes, looked like all at sea for a lot of it, and then scores the equaliser that gets them a point right at the end, which is a really interesting little twist because he's very dangerous in the opposition penalty box as well. But look, I think the fact that
he kiboshed your Austin Powers analogy, though, didn't he, by getting that goal?
Oh no, he defrosted by then.
Oh right, okay.
That's
Just
fine.
checking.
But I think when you look at from the moment Ranieri was in the door, one of the first things he said is, "I've got to ask why this guy's not playing." You know, he's one of the
Good
best
question.
defenders in the world, but it is Roma in microcosm because, as Nicky says, it's gonna take time. And whether this season's a write-off, it already feels to me, especially with the gap developing at the top. And if you look at Serie A over the last couple of seasons, there are more good teams that deserve European competition than there are European places.
Yeah.
And this is the problem for them this season. But this season, in terms of Europe, I think it's gone already. I think they've blown any chance they might have had. Or really, the way the Friedkins have managed the club has blown any chance they might have had. Ranieri needs to set a base for his successor. That's what he needs to do. But Hummels is someone who can help him do that. I mean, he said he brought him on at Napoli at half-time and changed the system because he said, I wanted us to dominate the ball more, and that's something that Hummels can help us do, and that extra man at the back can help us do. But whereas like it might take 3, 4, 5 weeks for Hummels to get up to pace, I think it's the same for Roma as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And for the record, Hummels started against Atalanta and arguably was their best player. He was really good in that game, had a really nice game against Retegui.
Until his body just wouldn't have it anymore and he went off.
Yeah.
Which is indicative of those teething problems, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what you just said, Andy, about pre-seasons. They matter. And I think that realistically, even with the full pre-season, he might be at that point again where we say, okay, a player who can contribute, but can he play every game? And especially in a busy part of the schedule like this is right now. But the fact that he's integrated in some way, I'm certain will be pleasing to the Friedkins, and certainly if he can play as well as he did for the minutes that he did against Atalanta, it'll be a positive for Roma. It's not the only change that Ranieri's made. I think the other really striking one for me is that Lorenzo Pellegrini, of course, the club captain, he did start the game against Napoli, came off at half-time, and he hasn't played at all the last 2 games since. Kind of, I guess, swings back a bit to that conversation having about Lewandowski and what's sort of tearing someone out and what's actually protecting them a bit, what's giving them a rest. And we don't quite know, I think, is the answer between Ranieri and Pellegrini. He hasn't certainly publicly torn into them or anything, but I think he's just given that idea of maybe he needs a little reset and needs to get back to doing what he does best in the way that Ranieri put it, which he hasn't had a great season, Pellegrini, and he is such an important player for them when he's at his best, going between the lines, midfield and attack.
Well, I think it's all about the fact that he was implicated, whether fairly or unfairly, along with Brian Cristante, in the exit of Daniele De Rossi.
Yeah.
Now, that's something that Ranieri, I think that really shows what Ranieri's strength is this season, in the fact that whatever you think of him being able to do on the pitch and adjusting the team, it's being Roman, it's being that guy from Testaccio, it's understanding Roma as a club, because he came in there and straight away in one of his first press conferences, he addresses, look, I know you're thinking about De Rossi, but Cristante didn't get him sacked and Pellegrini didn't get him sacked. And he talked about how what's been obvious in a way that from a distance that Pellegrini's been like quite personally hurt by this, and this has really affected his form so badly because he's a guy who has been the captain of the first team, who came through the academy initially before he went out to Sassuolo, who playing for Roma means a lot to him. But what Ranieri did is he cut straight to the chase. It's like, okay, well, not just think about what he is as a player. He's quite introverted.
Yeah.
And so for us to be able to deal with that is going to be an ongoing process as well.
I think that's kind of the other great value of Ranieri. It's not just the Roman thing that's huge and absolutely like essential to him even being, I think, given permission by the fans to have that role. But there is another element, which is, I guess, there's got to be a more polite way of putting it in this, but the old man perspective of just having a long view of what a footballer needs, of what the big picture of everything is. And I think there was, even just in his press conference the other day, these subtle little things that remind you of just how long he's been at this. The game this weekend is against Lecce. I saw someone describing it in a paper as a relegation battle, which made me roll my eyes a bit because I think that's hyperbole. But Roma are 15th at the moment. But Ranieri coming in saying, "Oh, we know how much the Lecce game means to Roma." That's a reference to 1986 when Roma were in the title race up until the end of the 85-86 season, and then Lecce, who were, I think they finished bottom that year, upset them, and it wasn't the only reason Roma didn't win the league that season, but it was close to the end, and it was an important result. So that's the level of long view he's got on Roma and Roman culture.
But he wasn't employed for his long view. I wonder whether he was employed, as Andy suggested, to create the base for his successor. You might have talked about it in previous OTCs. I don't know. What is his job? What's the expectation from him?
For Ranieri, I think the first thing is safe set of hands to the end of the season. I think if you ask the Friedkins for their most honest desires, I'm certain it's that the club ends this season some way, somehow back in Europe. At the beginning of this season, it was without question to get into the Champions League, but I think that realistically looks very, very unlikely, and even getting into Europe would be a mighty challenge. But the club wants to be, expects to be in Europe, and has spent enough money already and intends to spend more to achieve that. Could
you build a team to win the Europa League? Is that what January would be about?
I guess so. They've talked about in particular wanting to upgrade the fullback positions and perhaps have an alternative up front. But it's a weird squad when you look at it. There's things about it that are promising. Obviously, when you've got Dovbyk in form, Dovbyk's had a very frustrating start, I think, at Roma, because at times he really has looked the business, but he just keeps doing things like hitting the bar at cranky moments instead of quite getting it in. I think he could well develop into a very strong number 9 for them. Then you've got Dybala behind him, who's brilliant when he's there, but how often is he there? And I'm not really sure it was good for the club that he stayed this summer, even though emotionally they wanted him to. Then you've got Pellegrini, who hasn't been at his best for such a long time. Cristante, who hasn't been at his best. There's lots in the squad that when I look at it and go, well, if all these things came together, I think this could be a very strong team, but it's not feeling that close at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like the last thing they need to do is go out in January and buy a load of players.
Yeah.
Something of a sad note, though, to end this part of the conversation, was that the Roma player, although he's out on loan to Fiorentina, Edoardo Bove, has, he is conscious, but after collapsing on the pitch at the weekend. Do you know anything more about his current condition?
So the good news is that Bove is out of intensive care. He's had a whole battery of tests on his heart, and doctors are happy that he's not in danger. He's not currently at risk. He's not fully left hospital, but he's having conversations with friends who come to visit him. He had a video call with the whole Fiorentina team. So the immediate danger has absolutely passed. They, of course, are doing everything they can to try to get to the bottom of what the problem was and make sure that they understand what risk there would be going forward. And what we don't know at the moment is what his future in football could look like, because, of course, if you look at the case of Christian Eriksen, who had a cardiac arrest on the pitch, he is now back playing football at a professional level, but he's not playing in Italy because regulations in Italy made it impossible for him to play with the fitted defibrillator that he has, the internal defibrillator, to manage that condition. And we don't know yet if that's something that Bove will need. We don't know the details of all that side of his future prognosis, I suppose. But the important thing just right now is that he's healthy and there's no further risk to his life right now.
And of course, it goes without saying that all of us here at OTC wish him the very best in his recovery.